Hello. This recording is on Chapter 5 of the ER book, Beyond the First Entity Diagram. This is a rather short chapter, so it's not going to be a very long recording. Well, in this chapter, we are examining the entity, defining a relationship, looking at preliminary grammar, and defining a second entity. So, basically, to review what we talked about in the last chapter, attributes are data stored, or attributes are what we store data in. Entities are things we store data about. So, what if the user requires more information stored about an attribute? Well, we change the attribute to an entity so that we can store more information about the attribute. So, basically, what we would do is examine an entity. For example, in an employee database, we have an attribute called department. Department could represent the fact that an employee works in a particular department. But the moment we want to store information on the department, for example, we want to store the name of the manager of the department, where the department is located, and any other piece of information about the department, then we know that rather than having an attribute of the employee entity, we have now an entity called department because we want to store information about the department. So on slide 6, here is the department entity with attributes location, title, and manager. Now that we have another entity, department, how is this related to our first entity, employee? So we have a relationship or a connection between the two entities, the department and the employee entity. And if you remember from the last set of slides, a relationship is generally a verb or a verb phrase. And in the chain-like model, we like to show the relationships in diamonds. And on the next slide, on slide 8, we have a department entity with its 3 attributes, the employee entity with its attributes that we developed in the last set of slides, and then the work-in relationship. So we identified the relationship as work-in. So the ER diagram would read something like an employee may work in a department, or a department has employees working for it. The degree of the relationship, of the relations, depend on the number of entities involved. So in this case, we have a binary relationship because we have 2 entities involved in the work-in relationship. There's the department entity and the employee entity. When 2 entities are related to each other, it's called the binary relationship. Once again, we have 2 entities related to each other, so we have a binary relationship. Now, for the preliminary grammar of the relationship, an entity relationship, an entity 1 relationship entity 2. So the first part of the grammar is normally in active voice, and the second part is usually in passive voice. So for example, an employee works in the department, and the department has employees working for it. So, defining a second entity. What if we were to define another entity? For example, we'll keep the original employee entity, but what if we were to define another entity, say equipment? It's the same idea. We need to store more information on the equipment of the employee, so we develop another entity called equipment with its 3 attributes, type, serial number, and manufacturer. And again, that is related to the employee attribute through the relationship use. Does a relationship exist? A situation may occur when two entities are required, but their relationship is unclear. The entities may have indirect relationships, thus they may need another entity to link them. So at this point, we just draw the entities as independent entities, and we would later figure out what it is that would link them. So the methodology that we have developed so far is to select one primary entity, show its attributes, label the keys, show the data, which was all discussed actually in the last set of slides, use structured English, which is still in the last set of slides, and in this set of slides, where we're developing a second entity, we basically go to step 3, which is review the current attributes in the primary entity to see if the data about an attribute needs to be stored. So we basically look at all the attributes in the entity and see if there's any entity that needs, any attribute of any entity that needs data stored about it. And if it does, then we pull that attribute out and make that an entity. If an attribute or attributes are entities, convert the attribute to an entity, define the relationship between the new entity and the primary entity, and repeat step 3 for the new entity. So that is the methodology that we would develop for this set of slides, basically defining the second entity. Is we'd be reviewing the attributes to see if there's anything that we need to store information about on any of the attributes, and if we do, then that becomes an entity. And then we go on to step 4, which says review the requirements and specifications and determine if other entries are needed, create an entity and attributes, go to step 3 for the new entity, and then step 4 says connect the new entity via a relationship to the previous entities. And that's about it for this chapter. It's a rather short chapter, so I'll let you read the chapter, and hope this helps in the explanation a little or makes it easier for you. Bye.